Hey, what's happening everyone? Consciously here with a brand new Pokemon Go video. I hope your day is going really well and let's get right into it. Okay, so for today's video, I'm going to be giving you a raid guide for Zacian, Zamazenta, Regieleki, and Regidrago. These 4 legendaries are now in 5-star raids, and they're actually pretty easy to take down. I'm also going to be talking about which one of these 4 you should focus in on, mainly because only one of them is actually any good, while the rest are not necessarily something you need to care about. But hey, if you end up enjoying this video and found it to be informative, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more content just like this one. And without further ado, let's talk about these 4 legendary raids. Let's start this off with Zacian, one of my favorite Pokemon currently in the game. This Pokemon is a pure fairy type, which means it's only going to have 2 weaknesses, and those are going to be poison and steel type attacks. Now, it also has resistances to dark, fighting, and dragon, which means you will not want to bring any Pokemon with those moves. Now, if you want the perfect IVs for Zacian, you're going to want one that is 2188, and if it's weather boosted, it's going to be 2735. Zacian is going to be weather boosted by just one weather type, and that is cloudy weather. Now, if you want to secure the win against Zacian raids, you will need 3 other trainers that are at least level 30 with the right counters, and if you want to challenge yourself, you can potentially duo this raid boss. You just want to make sure that both of you are at least level 40 with all of your Pokemon being level 40, and they need to be the best counters that you can bring. Speaking of which, these are going to be the best counters up against a Zacian raid. You will want to go with either Mega Gengar or Mega Beedrill with poison type attacks, and then you will want to go with Duskmane Necrozma as a steel type attacker, and Shadow Metagross and Shadow Excadrill with steel type attacks are also going to suffice. And if you want to use budget counters because you do not have any of these Pokemon, you could go with regular Metagross as well as regular Excadrill, just make sure they're bringing steel type attacks. Eventually, we're gonna get Mega Metagross, and that is going to be the absolute best Pokemon to bring up against Zacian, but in the meantime, we're gonna have to go with poison types. Those are going to be some of the best counters up against Zacian, primarily because of the sheer amount of DPS that both Mega Gengar and Mega Beedrill can bring. Next up, let's talk about Zamazenta. Just like with Zacian, it's only going to have one type, and that is going to be fighting type. This means it's only going to have 3 weaknesses, which include fairy type, flying type, and psychic type attacks. It's also going to be resistant against bug type, dark type, and rock type attacks, so avoid bringing any Pokemon with those moves. Now, for the perfect IVs for Zamazenta, it's going to be different than Zacian. You're going to want one that is 2188, and if it's weather boosted, you will want one that is 2735. Those are the magic numbers for a Hundo Zamazenta, so be on the lookout for those. And just like with Zacian, Zamazenta is going to be weather boosted by cloudy weather, so if it's cloudy outside, make sure you go out and raid for both of these Pokemon. Now, if you want to secure the win up against Zamazenta, you may potentially be able to do it with just 3 other trainers, but safely, you will want to go with 5 trainers total in the raid group. And if you want to challenge yourself, you can potentially duo this Pokemon, but you will need the absolute best counters, including the right Mega Evolutions. And speaking of best counters, obviously you will want to use Mega Rayquaza with flying type attacks. That's going to be the absolute best Pokemon up against Zamazenta. And a great alternative when it comes to Mega Evolutions include Mega Gardevoir. That is a very powerful Pokemon to bring against this raid boss. And then Shadow Mewtwo and regular Rayquazas are also really solid attackers, and regular Mewtwo with psychic type attacks is also pretty solid as well. Now, if you do not have any of these Pokemon, you could go with the following budget counters. Alakazam with psychic type attacks and Gardevoir with fairy type attacks are both going to deal enough damage to take down Zamazenta. Next, let's talk about the 2 Regi Pokemon that you could potentially go up against in 5-star raids. Starting off with Regidrago. This is going to be a pure dragon type Pokemon, which means it's going to have weaknesses against fairy, ice, and dragon type attacks. It's also going to be resistant to the starter Pokemon types. These include grass, fire, water, and electric. Now, to get perfect IVs for Regidrago, you will want one that is 1699, and if it's weather boosted, it's going to be 2124. Regidrago is only weather boosted by one weather type, and that is going to be windy weather. Now, to secure the win against Regidrago, you will need 3 other trainers that are at least level 30, and if you want to challenge yourself, you can duo this raid boss. Just make sure both of you are at least level 40 with the best counters. Now, in terms of those counters, you will want to go with Mega Rayquaza, but instead of flying type attacks, you will want to go with dragon type attacks. Obviously, you will have Dragon Ascent as one of your moves, but if the other charge attack is Outrage, it's going to perform extremely well against Regidrago. And an alternative is going to be Mega Gardevoir Gardevoir with fairy type attacks, that's a very powerful option you could use. Now in terms of non-Mega Evolutions, you will want to go with either Origin Form Dialga or Origin Form Palkia. Just make sure they have their Adventure Effect moves. This includes Roar of Time for Origin Form Dialga, and then Spatial Ren for Palkia. And if you do not have either of these Pokemon, then Shadow Garchomp is obviously going to be the top Dragon type that you could use, but that is going to be a very expensive Pokemon, so you could opt to go with regular Garchomp as well as regular Gardevoirs as well. And then finally, let's talk about Regieleki. Just like with all of the other Pokemon that are going to be available, it only has one type, and it's going to be Electric type. That also means it only has one weakness, and that's going to be Ground type attacks. It's also going to be resistant against Electric, Flying, and Steel type attacks, so obviously do not bring any Pokemon with those typings. Now, if you want perfect IVs for Regieleki, it's going to be 1602, and if it's weather boosted, it's going to be 2002. That's a pretty great year in my opinion. And considering that Regieleki is a pure electric type, that means it's only going to be weather boosted by rainy weather, and that's not necessarily that important, but if you want a weather boosted Regieleki, then make sure you go out and raid it when it's raining outside. Just make sure you're careful because rainy weather can potentially be dangerous. Now, if you want to secure the win against Regieleki, it's probably the easiest out of the 4 raid bosses that are currently available. It's going to only require 2 other trainers in your raid party that are at least level 30 with the best counters. And you can potentially solo Regieleki, just make sure you're using the absolute best counters, which we can get into right now. The obvious best choice you will want to bring is going to be Primal Groudon. That is by far the best ground type in the game right now. And then a great alternative is going to be Mega Garchomp with ground type attacks. In terms of non-Mega Evolution Pokemon, you will want to bring either Shadow Excadrill with ground type attacks, or even Shadow Groudon with ground type attacks. Both of those are going to perform really well. And if you do not have either of these shadows, then just have a whole bunch of Excadrill. Those are definitely going to be worthwhile up against Regieleki. Alright, so out of these 4, which one should you go after? Well, it's pretty easy to say. It's going to be Zacian. Now, out of these 4, Zacian is the only one that is actually useful for the Go Battle League, as well as raid battles. And the reason for that is because there's not too many fairy types that you could use, and Zacian is going to be really powerful as a fairy type. When it comes to Zamazenta, it's going to pale in comparison to other fighting types, especially Terrakion, Shadow Machamp, and different things like that. And then when it comes to Regidrago and Regieleki, they can potentially be useful, but there's just so many really good options among those types. Like if we were to talk about Regieleki and compare it to the other electric types that you could use, it's kind of like comparing Deoxys attack form with Mewtwo. You would much rather go with Mewtwo because it has a lot more bulk and a lot more TDO. But when it comes to Regieleki, it's kind of in a similar boat. It's a very big glass cannon, like it can deal a lot of DPS, but it could also get knocked out really quickly, which makes it very weak in the long run. You're much better off going with Pokemon like Xurkitree or Zekrom. Those are definitely going to be much better options. And the same can definitely be said for Regidrago. In fact, I will say that when it comes to dragon types, Regidrago has a lot more competition, and that Pokemon is basically just a Pokedex entry. So yeah, unfortunately out of these 4, I will say that Zacian is the only one that deserves all of your raid passes. The other 3 are not necessarily terrible, but they're not going to be good enough to actually merit you powering them up. But at the very least, when it comes to Regieleki and Regidrago, those used to be elite raid bosses, so not a lot of players have those. And if you happen to be one of those players that still do not have a Regieleki or Regidrago because you missed out on those elite raid days, then maybe it wouldn't hurt to just pick up one of them so that you can have the Pokedex entry. And yeah, that's essentially going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts regarding these 4 raid bosses down below. We're going to have them until the end of the season, which is going to be December 3rd. So if you do not have any of these 4, make sure you go out and get them. But yeah, definitely share your thoughts regarding them down below in the comments so that we can have a great discussion. And thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. I'm Kanjinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you in the next one.